What's going on, everyone? Blue here at Blue Bears Games, and as promised today, I will be doing the upgrade guide for the Riveteers Rampage Commander Precon from Wizards of the Coast, and it has Henzi Toolbox Tour as the general. No stories for today, we're just going to get right into it, so let's start with the lands. So this deck, just like any deck that's more than 2 colors, has a need for mana fixing. Luckily, we have some tri-land, or a tri-land, that we can use in Zeotar's Proving Ground. It comes into play tapped, but at least it helps add at least one of the colors that you need. You've got shock lands like Overgrown Tomb, and check lands like Woodland Cemetery, and of course you've got all the ones that fit the color identity of this deck. You can also go into getting things like fetch lands and pain lands, originally in the Ice Age set. You've got things like the filter lands that they already started giving you in these precons, so some options there. This deck also needs some sack outlets to take advantage of the guys that you're blitzing in, and then of course they have to die anyway, so you might as well get some benefit out of them. So you got things like Phyrexian Tower for some mana ramp, Grim Backwoods for some card draw, High Market for some life gain. You've got some utility stuff so you can get some of the guys back from the grave after they've died. So you've got the Transform card, Having Ghoul Laboratory, and that transforms into Having Ghoul Mystery. Helps you get some guys back. And then, of course, from the Kamigawa set, there was a cycle of lands from there, and the black one, Takanuma Abandoned Mire, is a good option for this deck. And then last, you can do some ramp / mana fixing using Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth, and Cabal Coffers. Okay? And next, we're going to do some ramp stuff. Luckily, this deck is green, and the precon itself has some pretty good options for ramp, so to continue with that theme, I'm going to suggest things like Nature's Lure, 3 Visits, and Far Wanderings, because the threshold on this one should be easy to attain, and you should be able to get the 3 lands out of that one. And if you want to do mana rocks instead of spells, some of the ones that are pretty good here would be like Prismatic Lens, because it can help you with mana fixing, sometimes a problem in 3-colored and plus decks. Liquid Metal Torque is a good option, because just like I mentioned with red, green has ways to destroy artifacts as well, so it's a good little combination and ramp there. And then, of course, in all the decks that are above 2 colors, I always suggest Chromatic Lantern, just because it's great for mana fixing and a little bit of ramp. Up next, creatures. So with creatures, you're looking for specifics here. You're looking for creatures that have enters the battlefield, leaves the battlefield, or when it attacks effects, and the preference here is that you're looking for creatures that have multiple instances of one of these abilities. So let me give you some examples here. I'm going to start off with modular creatures. Modular creatures all have an enters the battlefield ability and when it dies ability. And specifically, I'm going to mention Arcbound Ravager here. And I understand that you can't blitz this in with Henzi's ability, but the fact of the matter is it comes into play with +1/+1 counters, and when it dies, you can spread those +1/+1 counters amongst another artifact creature. And that's the key here. It's an artifact creature, and so are actually all the modular creatures are artifacts. So if they're above 4 converted mana costs, or mana value, sorry, Henzi's ability applies here. Every time you blitz one in, it'll come into play. It'll probably be at a reduced cost. It'll get counters. You can attack with it. You can sack it for something, and then when it does die, you can go ahead and spread those counters onto another artifact creature. It's a good way to do it. That's the direction I myself would go in for this deck. Another example of something that when it enters the battlefield or when it leaves the battlefield effects would be something like Goblin Marshal. When it comes into play, you create tokens. When it leaves the battlefield, you create tokens. Examples of enters the battlefield and attacks is something like Archon of Cruelty or Primeval Herald. Both of them can do well in this deck. You have effects that are creatures that have when it attacks or when it dies, things happen. So Baylor is an example of that. And then you have something like Cityscape Leveler. This one's a little different just because it has a cast effect and then when it attacks effect. And the reason why it has a cast effect and not enter the battlefield is because it actually has an ability to come back with Unearth, and they didn't want to give you that option with the Unearth because it wasn't being cast. So it's a great option for this deck. After that, one utility creature I'm going to mention is Braid's Arisen Nightmare. So it allows you to sacrifice creatures and then get effects from that, and that's always great in a deck that most of your creatures die. What else we got here? We've got, I mentioned Unearth on Cityscape Level. There are a couple other abilities that go with that as well. So, persist abilities, like Puppeteer Click, so it'll come back when it dies. Flayer of the Hatebound has Undying, so again, it'll come back to the battlefield after it dies if you've cast it with Henzi's ability, or the reduced cost of Henzi's ability, and you blitz it. And then I'm going to mention Mikaeus the Unhallowed here, specifically because it gives all your non-humans Undying, and most of your creatures in this deck are probably not going to be human, so you can get multiple use out of things. You can have reduced cost from Henzi, it'll come into play, you'll have to sacrifice it, or you can sacrifice it for a benefit in multiple different ways before it does have to be sacrificed, and then it'll come back into play at the end of the turn. So, great option there. Next up, I'm going to mention Aristocrat style guys, and I'm going to actually mention Poison Tip Archer here. It's the best option for this deck. There are others. There's a bunch of different ones, so when all your creatures die, you at least get to drain your opponent's health. And then the last thing I'm going to mention on the creature side is the Eldrazi Titans. The reason why I like Eldrazi Titans here, same thing with the modular. They are colorless. They can be reduced. They're definitely more than 4 converted mana cost, or, I'm sorry, mana value. So Henzy's ability can reduce their cost. And here's the cool thing. With Blitz, you're actually casting them from your hand. So all the Eldrazi Titans have abilities that matter, that they're cast from your hand. So these will apply. So great option for this deck. And let's be honest, who doesn't like using Eldrazi Titans, especially at a reduced cost? Up next, we're going to go over some spells. One of the good benefits about being in this color combination is it's one of the most destructive as far as target removal. So you've got things that have only benefits and no downsides. So things like Bedevil and Terminate are great options for target removal. And of course, we're in black, so Damnation and a couple of the other spells that are out there that are a little bit more mana value to cast, but still good options as well. And of course, if you go the route of Modular or the Eldrazi Titans combined with them, you have All Is Dust, so you'll be able to get rid of everybody else's stuff, and you'll be able to keep your own. We have some Graveyard Recursion, because apparently that's what this deck wants to be able to do. So you have Living Death, or Living End, or even Agadeem's Awakening. We're in black, so obviously tutors are good. Green has some good tutors. Red doesn't have any good tutors, let's just be honest. So we're looking at things like Demonic Tutor, Vampiric Tutor, Grim Tutor. But you also have a Worldly Tutor if you want to go search for that one creature that just will win you the game. And I have a combo for that as well. There's card draw in here, so the options for card draw are a little limited because you're not in blue, but black has some ways to do it, red has some ways to do it. You got things like Deadly Dispute or Damnable Pact. You have to sacrifice a little bit of life or sacrifice some creatures, but you're doing that anyway, so you'll get some card draw to that. Red's got things specifically in the wheel section, so Wheel of Fortune, and I know that that's a very expensive card, but there are other options that are more budget-friendly in wheels for red. And then you've got looting stuff like Faithless Looting. Great option there, because you can even recast that if you need to. Green's options are okay. I mean, you've got things like Soul's Majesty, and of course Harmonize is one that I always suggest to people. It's been reprinted enough that it's budget friendly now anyway, and it's a 4 cast spell that lets you draw 3 cards. I mean, what's bad about that? So those are the options I have on some spell upgrades. Let's go over some enchantments now. So this section is where you're going to probably find your best options for sack outlets to gain benefits from all those things dying. So you have things like Goblin Bombardment, so you can throw some damage around. You've got Attrition, so you can do some creature removal, non-black obviously. You've got Malevolent Awakening, because you can get some of those creatures that previously died back. And Vampiric Rites helps you with some card draw and some life gain. One of the things that we're going to try to do here is gain benefit from all those guys that you have dying. So we're going to have things like Dictate of Erebos or Grave Pact, so whenever they die, your opponents have to sacrifice a creature. You've got some Aristocrat-style effects, so you're going to look at like Meat Hook Massacre, so you can gain life, drain your opponents when things die. Same thing with Bastion of Remembrance. Another benefit you can get from it is a little bit of ramp, so you've got Black Market as well. So every time a creature dies, you get a token on it, or a counter, sorry, and that counter will end up being mana later on. Some card draw that you can do, and I mention this in every deck that has green, and I will always mention this, is Guardian Project, one of the best card draw engines in Commander, because it actually doesn't have any negatives. And of course, we're in black, so Necropotence is a good option there. Some utility that you're going to look at as well. So there's a card out there called Journey to Eternity that turns into a land that lets you take creatures from your grave and put them back on the battlefield. So that's a good option. Sneak Attack, because if you don't have Henzy out, so there's no reduced cost, you at least can use that enchantment to continue to do the same thing that Henzy does anyway, and at a much cheaper cost. And then one of the things that I've recently found was Myth Unbound. It halves your commander tax, and because you want Henzy to die and come back multiple times to get that benefit of the blitz cost being reduced, it's a great option for this deck. So let's go over some artifacts now. So while not as good as the enchantment side, artifacts have some great sack outlets for you to utilize as well. You've got the altars. You've got Phyrexian Altar, Ashnod's Altar, and Altar Dementia. 2 of them give you mana ramp, and 1 of them helps mill cards. Not as effective here, but still a sack outlet. You can use Witch's Cauldron. It's the artifact version of a Vampiric Rites. And of course you have Birthing Pod. You're in green. You might as well take advantage of being able to sacrifice things to go get the creatures that you want in your hand that can affect your board state. An interesting one you can add here for an artifact is Sundial of the Infinite. So the cool thing here is that if you stack things right with Sundial of the Infinite, the end of turn effects go away, and you won't have to sacrifice your guys if you don't want to. Cloud Key is always a good option in almost any commander deck because it reduces the cost of whatever your main goal is, and here it would be creatures. So Henzy's ability will stack on top of a Cloud Key if you want. The Great Henge is a great option here as well, just because in green, it's not really mana ramp because it's a very expensive artifact to cast, but at least you'll get to draw cards and gain life with it, and it'll add mana to your mana pool as well. And the last artifact upgrade I'm going to mention here is Cauldron of Souls. You tap it, you can give any number of creatures that you want persist, so when you have to sacrifice any of those creatures you blitzed in, they can come back and permanently be on the board, albeit with a -1/-1 counter. As far as Planeswalker upgrades, this is going to be pretty short and quick. Look at the Vivians. So Vivian of the Hunt, Vivian Monsters Advocate, and Vivian Champion of the Wilds are good options for this deck. The best one of the 3, though, is the Vivian of the Hunt. So take a look at them. I'll have them up here for you to take a look at. You'll see all the benefits that you can get from sacrificing creatures and being able to cast creatures at instant speed and all that. So just read them, and you'll see why I'm suggesting them. And lastly, the combo I'm going to suggest for this deck is Chandra's Ignition with Blightsteel Colossus. So Chandra's Ignition is a sorcery that says that you can have target creature deal its damage equal to its power to each creature and each opponent. And Blightsteel Colossus has Infect, and because it's the creature dealing the damage, the Infect applies, and you're going to be able to Infect damage or poison counter out your opponents and win the game. The other advantage for Blightsteel Colossus is it's a colorless creature, kind of like I suggested with the modular creatures, and Henzi's ability can reduce the cost of getting it into play over time. And that's what I've got for you this week as far as the Streets of New Capenna of Riveteers Rampage Commander Precon goes. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, or just want to talk about the deck or any of the other decks and videos that I create, you can go ahead and contact me at bluebearsgames.online on Facebook. You can email me at bluebearsgames@gmail.com, and I'll get back to you when I have an opportunity. Or you can leave a comment in the section below, and I'll get back to you in that way. And then if you want to talk further after that, you can go ahead and contact me one of the other two ways. On top of that, if you're looking to help support the channel, there are a couple ways you can do so. The first way is actually just out of generosity. You can go ahead and do some donations to me. And the way you can do that is through PayPal at paypal.me/BlueBearsGames, at Venmo at BlueBearsGames, or through Cash App at $BlueBearsGames. The second way that you could help support the channel, this one actually gets you something for your money. You can go ahead and take a look at all the decks that I've made, and you can make a purchase of 1 or 2 or maybe even 5. I have 60-card decks available for sale, and I also have Commander decks available for sale. So if you're looking at them, you can go ahead and take a look at any of my stuff on the Facebook page or through the Facebook Marketplace. They're all available there. You can see the logo that you need to look for, and all those are available for purchase. You can contact me at any time, and we'll go ahead and talk about how you can acquire one of those. And the last option is the freest of the 3 options. You can do me the favor of subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already. That way, when I get to my 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 watch hours, somebody else will be paying for the bill. You can also like the video. Apparently, the analytics show that the more people who like your video, the more viewed it gets. So that would help me as well. Or you can share it out on your social medias, whatever one you have, and other people will eventually start subscribing and watching more videos. So all 3 options are great and will help support the channel. That is my time for the week. I want to thank you for watching. Please join me again next week for another Commander Precon unboxing and upgrade guide. Have a good week, and I will see you there.